Welcome back to the weekend with Anthony Opperman. Almost done with our return from Thanksgiving break, but before we bid adieu for this Saturday, certainly have to get to our wildlife report and welcome back for the first time since Thanksgiving from the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, good friend Chris Dunnavant. Chris, first and foremost, how was your Thanksgiving?
My Thanksgiving was great, of course, good food, but I had some really great fishing trips. Got a chance to fish a pond and also fished the James River on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and fished one of our department lakes on Friday after Thanksgiving, Powhatan Lakes, and had just some great fishing. I had a great time. I had not been down to Watkins Landing on the James in many years, since I was a kid, and really had been wanting to go back. It's really noted for great wintertime. Once the water cools down, the smallmouth bass come out of the shallower areas where the current is, and they really populate that slower moving, deeper stretch of river, and it's just known for great wintertime fishing. And I had a friend from Greentop join me, and we got a chance to fish. It was a real windy day, if anybody remembers, 20 to 30 mile an hour winds, but we said, you know what, I'm not letting the weather keep me from fishing. I'm going to press on. So we went out there and braved the conditions. But we just had a great day. We caught some big smallmouth, several in the 2.5 to 3 pound range. My friend Stan Cobb, he caught a 311. And at the end of the day, I was able to catch a 4.6. It was actually a length citation. That's a pretty big smallmouth. 5 pounds is a weight citation for Virginia, but 20 inches is a length, and it was a little over 20. So just a real awesome day. You know, first time being there in so many years, and just had some great fishing. It was a lot of fun, very rewarding day.
We're going to jump right into this, and you talk about fishing on a windy day and some of the challenges that presents. How do you overcome that? I mean, how were you still able to go out and enjoy that experience and that excursion?
Well, the big thing it influences is your boat control and how you can present your baits to the cover and in the water. And I look at as we've talked about before, I fish artificial lures, and I view lures as tools. They're just like a mechanic has tools in his toolbox, and he needs a particular tool for a particular job. And so that's the way I look at lures. And so during that day, it was very difficult with the conditions. You couldn't fish the slow-moving, bottom-crawling baits, and you really had to use fast-moving baits because that's just all you could do. And so we were throwing a lot of spinner baits and jerk baits and crank baits, just covering water. And sure, we missed some fish, and the wind's blowing, so we were just drifting by. But you just have to have a mindset of like, hey, we're just going to be able to cover a whole lot of water today, and we're going to make as many casts as we can and fish as productively as we can. And I find that, trying to go with the flow of the weather conditions instead of trying to fight against them, if you do that, you can get frustrated. So we just say, hey, how can we best fish these conditions and have a good time? And it ends up when you do that, you can have a really good day. And, it eliminated some water. The wind was blowing up against some banks and mudding them up. So it's like, that's not where we want to fish. So, we just really tried to adapt to the conditions the best we can.
Hey, Chris Dunnavant from the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation. And Chris, you talk about the conditions, and we flip the calendar now to December. And obviously, while so far it hasn't been that chilly outside yet, we really haven't got a tough cold blast yet. It's coming. So
sure.
I think sometimes you think, okay, well, it's going to be cold out. Being on the water and fishing maybe isn't the most appealing thing, but still fishing in cold weather definitely can be rewarding, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I think some of the best fishing of the year is during the wintertime, late fall, winter, early spring. And some fish actually peak. The fishing peaks during this colder months. And I like it because you have less competition on the water. A lot of people are hunting, or they don't like fishing in the cold weather. And like I said, some of the fish I can think of like crappie. They just bite better in the cold conditions. There are the perch fishing for white and yellow perch, excellent in the wintertime. And walleye, smallmouth, like I said, they bite very well in the wintertime. They're not as affected by those conditions. There's great trout fishing in our tailwaters, which are the waters just below a dam, so they have a more moderate temperature that's right for the trout, spring-fed creeks and rivers. So there is tons of wintertime opportunities. In fact, a lot of anglers, and myself included, look forward to the colder days and nights coming because we know good fishing is on the way. And two, that cold weather eliminates a lot of water. It congregates the fish in very specific areas, typically near deeper water or maybe sunnier banks, things like that. So you don't have to search the whole river or lake for where the fish are. You can eliminate 90% of the body of water immediately, and that really helps. And, you can concentrate on the area, and a lot of times you find them so stacked up in an area, you just catch them one after another once you figure out what they want to hit. So wintertime fishing is very rewarding. And, if you look at our Virginia wildlife calendar that we publish every year, if you look at December, you can notice that there's 2 state records that were caught in December, a walleye on the New River and a chain pickerel in December. There's also our calendar highlights that the white perch and yellow perch fishing is peaking in certain areas. And so, December fishing is great. And if folks do want to pick up a calendar, they can go to our website, www.huntfishva.com, and order a calendar. Or some of our retailers, tackle retailers, sell them at Green Top. They have calendars there on sale. You can get them right on the counter there.
And Chris Dunnavant from the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. And Chris, you and I were talking earlier in the week about the fact that not only for some populations of fish it's actually peaking during the winter months, but you also brought up the fact that sometimes the fish that you catch actually taste better when you want to cook them up. Talk about the reason for that.
Absolutely. I really like the way fish taste better in the cold weather. I think the fish are feeding up for the wintertime, so they're more hardy, they're meatier. The meat, the fact that it's cold makes it firmer. A lot of times in the summertime, I think the fish are cold-blooded, so when that water is hot, their metabolism is just really racing, and they are just doing everything they can to keep up with food, and the bait is spread out. Then in the wintertime, the bait fish are congregating. They've got better feeding opportunities. Their metabolism is slowed down. So that meat is firmer and healthy. And plus, too, it's just also safer for keeping your catch not spoiling in the cold weather. So, but I really do, and I think a lot of anglers agree, that the fish just taste better during this colder months. And so I really enjoy it. It's great to catch some fish, fillet them up, bring them home fresh, and eat them, and they taste so good this time of year. And but one thing about wintertime fishing I do want to say is that always safety is paramount. We want to send that message all the time. But clearly there's something to be aware of in the wintertime, that the water is cold and the dangers of hypothermia if you do fall in. So I recommend wearing life jackets. I recommend just using caution. Sometimes standing up in a boat, you hit a stump, you can fall in. So I recommend wearing the appropriate clothing, having some backup clothing. So if you do fall in, you can get out, get that wet clothing off, and get some dry, warm clothing back on. Get back to safety as quick as possible. I also recommend always fishing with a friend during the wintertime. I recommend that all the time, but especially in the winter. But if you cannot fish with a friend, if you got to go out by yourself, just make sure someone knows where you're going fishing that day, where you're launching, about where you're fishing, and about what time you're going to be back. And that way, if you're delayed and that you can't, with cell phones now, they can't get in touch with you, if there is a need to go and search for you, that really can help the search teams dial in, proximity where you're going to be, and that can be very helpful to get you in case you have gotten yourself in a situation that's distressful. So just keep safety paramount, especially in the wintertime.
Definitely good advice. Chris Dunnavant from the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. And Chris, I don't know how this always happens, but we always seem to get through this segment so quickly every week. One last thing, a topic that I wanted to touch upon with you. I know you've kind of been on your crappie kick, so to speak, and
yes.
You've definitely been into the hairline jigs and everything else, and you had a unique experience too, it sounded like, over the Thanksgiving break, having the opportunity to learn a little bit more about creating your own jigs and tying your own jigs. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Right, there's so much to talk about. We could just go on forever. But I really we talked about fishing with Greg South, Dr. Greg South, crappie fishing, and just having a great trip. And I really had the privilege. He called me up and said, hey, you want to come over and I'll show you what I do tying these jigs. And his operation is just amazing. He buys the hooks and the lead. He pours his own jig heads, paints them with powder paint. You heat the jig head up, you dip it in this powder paint, and it is just a hard finish. Then you bake it in the oven. And then taking the different craft hair or bucktail or feathers, tying your own jigs, and just the detail and intricacy involved. And it's really something that he really enjoys. And you can make a bait specific to his what he wants to do. He can have a bigger hook than maybe you can buy at the tackle shop, match the colors right, and as he would say, is it all necessary? But it gives him a lot of confidence, and it's so much fun and brings so much enjoyment that the confidence that, and I make a lot of my own baits too, and it's just hard to fish with a bait that you haven't made once you start making them. And the pleasure and reward of catching a fish on a bait that you've made, it's just a lot of fun making them, and it's a lot of fun catching the fish on your baits. But I just had a great time with Greg.
How much time on average goes into making each individual lure, do you think?
It might be tough to figure out. And the way Greg does it, he's not doing it for, fast production. It's a hobby, and he enjoys it. But it's an assembly line. So, like, one day, he'll pour jig heads, and he'll do that for, like, 2 hours. And then another day, he'll paint 200 jig heads. And then another night, he'll sit in front of the TV, and he'll dot the I's on the jig heads. And so then those jig heads are in bags, labeled with the hook size and weight. And then as he needs or as he has time, so then maybe one night he sits there for 2 hours and ties, 50 or, or whatever. However, I don't know what his pace is.
Definitely
but
a process.
It's got to be broken up in that kind of process. But you've got to have all those steps in place to get to the point of, okay, I can actually tie the bait that's ready to use.
Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly guest on our Wildlife Chat. And Chris, before I let you go, exciting, we've got actually a prize to give away for this segment, a Magellan Explorer 610 GPS device. And we've got one of these. It's valued at roughly $450, and
nice.
Certainly a nice prize for any sportsman or angler. And we've kind of devised a contest about how we're going to do this. Now, we're looking for a trophy fish picture submission. So if you've got a picture of a nice trophy fish that you've caught recently, we'll be taking these submissions through December 14th, and we'll announce the winner on our show on December 17th. But, Chris, real quickly, what are some of the criteria that people are going to have to try and meet in order to win this Magellan Explorer's GPS?
Well, our theme for this contest, we want to see the winning photo is going to be the one that most makes us want to go fishing. So the photo that says, I just got to go fishing, this is going to make me want to go fishing, that's going to be our winner. So send in your best fishing photo and one that just makes us want to go fishing, and you're going to get a nice Magellan GPS that'll be really handy on the water and really come good use.
In order to have your chance to win that Magellan Explorer 610 GPS device, you can log on to sportsradio910.com, look for our contest page, and you can upload your photos of your trophy catch there. Chris, as always, it's a blast, and look forward to catching up again next week.
I had a great time. Thanks, Anthony.
Again, Chris Dunnavant from the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly Wildlife Chat. Coming up, we got my game plan for the weekend. That's next here in the Weekend with Anthony Opperman.
The show is almost over, but the weekend is just getting started. More of The Weekend with Anthony Opperman is next on Sports Radio 910.